July 1943. Royal Air Force Bomber Command, Eastern England. Flight Lieutenant James Miller buttoned his battle dress jacket before the mission briefing. 7 brass buttons down the front. Standard issue. Regulation. Identical to every other jacket in the squadron, except 2 of his buttons were not buttons at all. Miller knew this. His squadron commander knew this. British Military Intelligence Section 9 knew this. The German guards at Stalag Luft III, who would search him 3 weeks later, did not know this. They checked his pockets. They examined his boots. They confiscated his watch. They looked directly at the brass buttons on his jacket and saw nothing unusual. They never unscrewed them. By 1943, the air war over Europe had reached its peak intensity. The Royal Air Force flew night bombing missions deep into Germany. The United States Army Air Forces flew daylight raids. Losses were catastrophic. In 1943 alone, Bomber Command lost 4,330 aircraft. The 8th Air Force lost over 2,000. Every crew that took off knew the statistics. 1 in 4 would not complete their tour. Shot-down aircrews who survived became prisoners of war. British intelligence understood the problem. Experienced pilots and navigators represented years of training, thousands of pounds in investment, knowledge that could not be replaced. If these men could escape from German prison camps and return to England, they could fly again. But escape required tools, maps to navigate, compasses for direction, saws to cut through bars, food for the journey. Getting these tools into prison camps was difficult. German guards inspected every package. They opened boxes. They examined contents. They searched for anything that could aid escape. Obvious tools were confiscated immediately. Maps hidden in bookbindings, compasses concealed in soap bars, saws wrapped in cloth. The Germans found them all. Section MI9, the British Escape and Evasion Organization, needed a better solution, not better hiding places, better disguises, tools that looked so ordinary, so completely normal that guards would examine them and see nothing suspicious. They found their answer in something every uniform already had: buttons. Christopher Clayton Hutton led the development effort. An intelligence officer with a background in stage magic and illusion, he understood misdirection. The best way to hide something was not to conceal it. The best way to hide something was to make it look like something else entirely, something so common that nobody questioned it. Hutton examined standard Royal Air Force uniform buttons. Brass construction, approximately 15 millimeters in diameter. 2 pieces joined by threading, the front piece screwed onto the back piece. This created a hollow space inside, a space just large enough for something very small, something like a compass. The technical challenge was precision. A functional compass requires a magnetized needle balanced on a pivot point. The needle must rotate freely. The pivot must be stable. The mechanism must fit inside a space smaller than a shirt button, and the button must look and feel identical to every other button on the uniform. The solution was elegant: 2 buttons working together. The bottom button contained a tiny steel pin projecting upward. This pin served as the pivot point. The top button was manufactured from magnetized steel disguised with brass coloring. This button, when placed on the pivot pin, would rotate freely until aligned with magnetic north. 2 small radium dots painted on the edge indicated north. A single dot indicated south. To use the compass, the airman unscrewed both buttons from his uniform. He placed the bottom button on a flat surface. The steel pin pointed upward. He carefully balanced the top button on this pin. The magnetized button rotated. Within seconds, it aligned with north. The radium dots glowed faintly in darkness, allowing navigation at night. The entire assembly looked like 2 ordinary uniform buttons. The threading matched regulation buttons exactly. The weight felt correct. The appearance was identical. A German guard examining the jacket would see standard brass buttons, nothing more. Production began in late 1942. The manufacturing was precise. Each button required careful assembly. The magnetization had to be exact. Too weak, and the compass would not align properly. Too strong, and the button might stick to metal objects, revealing its purpose. The radium application had to be minimal, just enough to glow, not enough to be detected. The buttons were distributed through multiple channels. Royal Air Force bomber crews received them sewn onto battle dress jackets. The buttons replaced ordinary buttons in specific positions. Early versions used right-hand threading. Standard buttons unscrewed counterclockwise. Compass buttons unscrewed the same way. This made them easy to identify and use. American aircrews also received compass buttons. The Office of Strategic Services worked with British MI9 to produce American versions. These were slightly different in design, but functioned identically. American versions were sometimes integrated into tunic buttons or trouser fly buttons. The principle remained the same. Hide the compass where guards would never think to look. The buttons formed part of larger escape kits. Silk maps hidden in jacket linings. Hacksaw blades concealed in boot heels. Energy tablets disguised as chocolate. Water purification tablets. Foreign currency. Concentrated food. Everything a downed airman needed to evade capture or escape from prison camps. The compass buttons proved their value immediately. Downed air crews used them to navigate to neutral countries. Switzerland offered safety for those who could reach it. Spain accepted Allied personnel who crossed the Pyrenees. Sweden provided refuge for airmen who reached Scandinavia. The compass buttons helped hundreds find their way. For prisoners already in camps, the buttons provided navigation for escape attempts. Tunnels led to freedom only if escapees knew which direction to travel. Compass buttons allowed precise route planning. Men could plot courses to railway lines, to rivers, to border crossings. The accuracy was crude but sufficient. North was north. That information alone could mean the difference between recapture and freedom. German intelligence eventually discovered the compass buttons. The exact date remains unclear, probably sometime in mid-1943. A guard somewhere unscrewed a button during a thorough search, perhaps accidentally, perhaps following a tip. The discovery changed everything. Once Germans knew about compass buttons, they began checking specifically for them. Guards unscrewed buttons during searches. They tested buttons with magnets. They looked for slight weight differences. The original compass buttons became compromised. British intelligence responded with remarkable speed. Within weeks, new compass buttons entered production. These versions used left-hand threading. The buttons unscrewed clockwise instead of counterclockwise. German guards trained to unscrew buttons. Counterclockwise would tighten these buttons instead of opening them. The simple reversal restored the element of surprise. The modification worked. German guards knew compass buttons existed. They knew buttons could conceal compasses. But they did not know about the reverse threading. Guards who found standard buttons on a jacket would attempt to unscrew them counterclockwise. Regular buttons would unscrew. Reverse thread compass buttons would tighten. The guard would conclude these were normal buttons and move on. Production numbers remain uncertain. Thousands of compass buttons were manufactured. Exact figures were not recorded or were destroyed after the war. What is documented, the buttons were standard issue for Royal Air Force bomber crews from late 1942 onward. American bomber crews received them as part of escape and evasion briefings before missions over Europe. The distribution was widespread, but not universal. The effectiveness is harder to measure. How many men used compass buttons to escape? How many successfully navigated to safety using these tiny instruments? The numbers are lost to history. What survives are individual accounts. Flight Lieutenant Robert Key used his compass button after being shot down over Holland. Squadron leader Roger Bushell had compass buttons when he organized the Great Escape from Stalag Luft III. Wing Commander Douglas Bader carried compass buttons during his multiple escape attempts. The buttons represented something larger than their physical size suggested. They represented the commitment of Allied intelligence to bringing men home. Every button manufactured was a statement. We have not forgotten you. We are helping you. We believe you can escape. We are giving you the tools. The compass buttons also represented American and British cooperation at its finest. British MI9 developed the concept. American intelligence adopted it. American manufacturers produced variants. The buttons were distributed to all Allied aircrews, regardless of nationality. The goal transcended national boundaries. Bring the men home. Keep them fighting. After the war, the compass buttons remained classified for decades. The techniques were too valuable to reveal. Future conflicts might require similar devices. The British maintained the classification until the 1970s. Only then did former prisoners of war begin sharing their stories. Only then did museums acquire examples for display. Today, original compass buttons are rare. Most were destroyed after use. Some were lost during escapes. A few survive in museums. The Imperial War Museum in London displays several examples. The National World War II Museum in New Orleans has American versions. Private collectors occasionally find them. Authentication is difficult. Reproduction buttons exist. Distinguishing original wartime buttons from later copies requires expert examination. The legacy of the compass buttons extends beyond World War II. The concept influenced Cold War escape and evasion equipment. Modern military personnel still carry concealed navigation aids. The specific designs have changed. GPS receivers replace magnetic compasses, but the principle remains identical. Hide the tool in plain sight. Make it look like something ordinary. Give the captured soldier a chance. The compass buttons prove that innovation in warfare does not always mean bigger weapons or faster aircraft. Sometimes, innovation means making something impossibly small. Sometimes it means hiding something in the most obvious place. Sometimes it means trusting that a tiny, magnetized button, no larger than a fingernail, could guide a man 200 miles through enemy territory to freedom. The numbers tell part of the story. 15 millimeters in diameter. 2 buttons working together. Thousands manufactured. Hundreds distributed. Exact figures unknown. But numbers alone miss the larger truth. Every button represented hope. Every button said that capture was not the end. Every button gave a man in a German prison camp the ability to know which way was north. And knowing north meant knowing the way home. British intelligence did not invent the magnetic compass. They did not create new navigation technology. They simply took existing technology and made it smaller, made it simpler, made it invisible. They took a compass and disguised it as a button, and in doing so, they created one of the most elegant escape tools of the war. The German guards who inspected prisoners never imagined that the buttons on a jacket could be navigation instruments. They checked pockets. They examined boots. They searched thoroughly, but they saw buttons and assumed buttons were buttons. Nothing more. That assumption cost them hundreds of potential recaptures. That assumption allowed hundreds of men to navigate to freedom. The compass buttons worked because they were perfect. Perfect in simplicity. Perfect in disguise. Perfect in function. A downed pilot could carry nothing suspicious, but he could wear his uniform, and his uniform had buttons. Standard regulation buttons. Buttons that happened to point north when unscrewed and balanced on a pin. That was American and British ingenuity at its finest. Not building something new. Taking something old and making it work in a new way. A compass hidden in a button. An escape aid sewn onto every uniform. A navigation tool that looked like nothing at all.